Welcome to Dr. Cindy Speaks, regular musings and reflections on politics, current events, and life as a congressional candidate. Dr. Cindy Banyai is a mom and small business owner fighting for our water, our health, our community. She's running for the people of Southwest Florida, trying to flip Florida 19 from red to blue. Listen as she speaks truth to power and gets real about being a mom and a candidate.
Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Cindy Banyai here for Dr. Cindy Speaks. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It is it's not April anymore. It's May 18th, 2020. I know it's a bit of a time warp here sometimes living in the era of coronavirus. But I'm so happy to be here with you today. So I am Dr. Cindy Banyai, like I said, and I'm a mom and small business owner fighting for our water, our health, and our community. I'm running for Congress here in Southwest Florida, Congressional District 19, and that runs all the way coastal Southwest Florida, Boca Grande down to Marco Island. So we are having a rainy day here today in Fort Myers, where I am based, and it is going to be a little bit of a soggy day for us here, which is going to be good overall, I think, for our region. We've been in drought-like conditions, and it's been a very dry time coming out of the end of the dry season for us. And we've had a lot of wildfires, brush fires, spinning up here, some particularly strong ones that ended up with some homes being destroyed in my guest district here coming up. And as soon as she calls in, we're going to go ahead and let her on to speak with us. I'm so excited to have her with us. But so the rain is a good thing for us here. It's a bad thing if you kind of look at it in terms of where we are with hurricane season coming upon us starting on June 1st. And I tweeted about this yesterday, I believe, letting everybody know, just get ready. You're on notice. June 1st is the beginning of hurricane season. So we have to start to prepare. We cannot just, let one calamity lead to another, right? So I see that she is ready. So I have my guest here, Maureen Porras. She's a candidate for Florida State Representative District 105. She's got some exciting things to share with us. So I'm going to go ahead and get her connected with us. So hello, Maureen.
Hi, Cindy. How are you? Cindy?
Cannot hear you. Let me see if that is my own fault here for a moment. Hello, Maureen.
Yes. Cindy,
I can hear you.
Hi, how are you?
Good. My apologies. I had it configured. I just came off of a debate this morning that held by Wink News here against my Democratic opponent here in District 19. And so I had my volume way down, so I reduced the feedback. So good thing I thought of thinking that. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us here, Maureen. It's exciting to have two women here today running to represent people in the state of Florida and do some good work that we know that a woman's touch can be valuable in. But I would like for you to start off by just introducing yourself, who you are and where you're running, what's going on. Just give us the brief intro here to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. I really do look forward to our conversation today. So my name is Maureen Porras, and I am a candidate for state representative in District 105. So that district is very unique. It's a very geographically large district. It stretches all the way from Broward County through Miami-Dade County and all the way to parts of Collier County, including Golden Gates, and Naples Manor. So I am an immigration attorney. I have been providing immigration legal services for over 11 years. I am currently the managing attorney and director of immigration legal services for a global nonprofit called Church World Service. And what we do is we provide immigration and refugee services to individuals that come into the U.S. here. And I actually filed to run in this district back in November. And, that decision was not made very lightly. It was after spending the last 4 years attempting to defend one of the most vulnerable populations here in South Florida, which is immigrants, and just seeing how difficult and challenging it was, and just trying to keep up with all the anti-immigration legislation that really was coming out every week. It was hard to keep up, and just doing our best to afford immigrants basic human rights, and just to defend families from separation, and just doing our best to help the community. At one point, I was almost arrested for representing a client before ICE, and honestly, that's when I said I've had enough. I think that really the best way to defend not just immigrants, but just anyone against hurtful policies is to not allow them to become policy in the first place. And in order to do that, we need legislators that will safeguard our individual rights and that will really put the best interests of the communities first. And, again, my decision to run was based on my years of experience working with the community and defending our community from all these different harmful policies. And here I am.
Well, and here you are, and so thankful we are to have you here. I appreciate you telling us about yourself and your background, and just so everybody can know a little bit about how Maureen and I are connected. So Maureen's district is like right next to the edge of the Collier component of District 19. So we have been together on several candidate, forum type of things where we're, speaking particularly to Collier Democratic groups. And, we really just thought like, hey, let's get together and have a conversation about women running in this district. So this is why this area. And so that's why we had decided to come together, and I'd seen Maureen speak on several occasions, and it was just very impressive and refreshing to see a woman who is poised and knowledgeable and passionate about her area of work put herself out there to be a representative for the people. And just recently, if I'm going to go ahead and give you some additional props here, Maureen, you got a very, very fantastic endorsement, didn't you?
I did. I was actually recently endorsed by Ruthless Florida, which is an organization that helps recruit and also elect pro-choice Democratic women to the state legislature. And that was a huge, huge honor. I'm extremely humbled. And we definitely do have a good opportunity, not just in District 105, but also on the congressional level, to elect a pro-choice Democratic woman to the seats that we're both running for. And my latest endorsement was actually from one of our state senators, Senator Annette Taddeo. She is actually the Miami-Dade Democratic Party's committee chairwoman. And so, when I first filed, I also received the endorsement of State Senator Oscar Brainin. And so now I have the endorsements of the two Democratic state senators that cover District 105. So it's a huge honor. And I think that we definitely need women's voices and leadership right now, not just in Tallahassee, but in the U.S. Congress. So I'm extremely excited. I have been following Cindy. I have been following you, Cindy, and you are just amazing. You're inspiring, and I have so much respect for everything that you do and how you handle your candidacy so well. I mean, I was really blown away by the last candidate forum that I saw you in. You definitely hit the immigration issues it just very well that I was completely blown away. So I'm so happy you're in this.
Yeah, and I'm happy you're here too. And let's talk about immigration first, because I think that for me, my platform, I always, I got my big three is our water, our health, our community. Mm-hmm. I roll some of the immigration issues into the our community component of that, because it has also been a part of my work here in Southwest Florida as well. I had just last year finished up a project working with immigrant communities through Hendry County. Now that's outside of our district, but it's in broader Southwest Florida. I did a piece of research that was funded by the Mott Foundation and coordinated through the Southwest Florida Community Foundation, trying to map immigrant communities around that area, learning not only just mapping, like physically mapping where they are, although we did do physical mapping and I did lose my research team in the middle of an orange field, but that's another story altogether. But we were also, looking at where people were connected to and from. So we did some in-depth interviews, surveys, and community focus groups with folks around Hendry County. And we found some really amazing things, some things that really dispelled the myths that people have about immigrants, that folks are just coming in here, they're fly by night, they're terrible people, or they're low educated. And what we found out is that in Hendry County, the people who were in migrant, we were calling them transnational populations, because it wasn't just necessarily recent immigrants. It was folks who had strong ties outside of the United States. But amongst those people, they had been here 10 years or more on average. They were people who owned their homes, they were, built businesses, and they still had these strong family connections outside of the United States. Many of them still sent remittances back home to the tune of between $200 and $500 every other month was what the average was, which is, I think a very reasonable amount of, if you think about familial support, and it's not a significant leakage from the community, quote unquote, is what I would call it in economic terms, which is one of the concerns that people have is like, oh, they're just coming here, taking money and sending it all back home. Well, they're taking money, they're coming here, they're a productive part of the economy, they're sending some money back home, but they're also investing it back in themselves, their family, and their communities. We found within that community that the largest connection point was Oaxaca, Mexico. And we then started building through the Community Foundation partnerships with other community foundations and philanthropic organizations in Oaxaca to try to bridge the gap and serve the needs of that community as well. So anyway, I just share that because it's a piece of my work that I don't talk about a heck of a lot because it's just, I've done so much stuff sometimes that I got my fingers in everything. But it was a very recent part of my work. It's a very exciting piece of work for me. It brought me into a lot of the immigration circles of particularly legal circles around Southwest Florida, people who were providing services to immigrants. And it afforded me an opportunity to connect with those organizations and learn from them. And so, it was a very eye-opening experience. And I promise to anybody who's skeptical about this particular issue, just if you talk to people who are in this space like Maureen, you will instantly understand better the situation with the real live people who are affected by immigration policy in this country. So I want to hand it over to you, Maureen. Now tell us a little bit about that. So what is it like? What have you been seeing on the ground that really compels you to say, we need to do this different?
Yeah, absolutely, Cindy. And you're right. The way that I can describe immigrants is immigrants are, and by the way, I'm an immigrant myself. I actually, I was born in Nicaragua and I came to the United States when I was 7 years old. So not only do I have the immigrant experience, but, I also work in the field and I've been in the field for over 11 years. So immigrants and the immigrants that I have seen and that I have helped, they're hard workers. And oftentimes they get left behind. They're ignored, sort of how, they were ignored in the creation of the COVID-19 relief. And, I thought about it and I said, well, it happens all the time. It does, even though we have immigrants that are contributing to the economy, that are essential healthcare workers, that are on the field, in the agricultural and the farms, working and making sure that we have everything that we need. And yet they're still ignored. They're left out most of the time. And, I thought to myself, it's okay. You know why? Because immigrants are very resilient, and they will make it work however they can, with or without, being taken into consideration, and they'll do it. Of course, there were different counties and different cities that came together, and communities that came together to help immigrants with, just getting through this pandemic. But in general, immigrants are left out, and they'll continue to work, and they'll continue to provide for the communities. So, that was something that has always compelled me to help. And if there's a benefit that's available to them, I will find it and I will help them access that, and not necessarily financial assistance. I mean, immigration benefit for them to be able to become green card holders, or to stay with their families here in the U.S., because a lot of immigrants have immediate family members that are U.S. citizens, and that they're born here, and that are also part of society. And my goal is to keep them united. And, I'm talking about immigrants that have absolutely zero record, that have worked here, paid taxes, and they're contributing members of society. And so this is what really compels me. And I remember my own immigrant story and my mother's immigrant story. She was actually the first one to come to the U.S. She was around 19, and by that time she had already 3 daughters. Her first one was when she was 16, and she came to the U.S. to build a better life for us, to give us an opportunity. And I didn't see her until I was 7 years old. So she left when I was 6 months old, and I didn't see her again until I was 7. And, those are the type of sacrifices that immigrant parents make to give their children a better opportunity. And those are the stories that you hear about the most when you're dealing with immigrants. Okay, so again, they're here, they're hard workers, they contribute to society, and the way that they have been treated recently by the administration is, like we all know, it's just criminal.
Yeah,
it's
horrible.
It's criminal. And again, I have been doing this for 11 years. I have seen the changes in administration, from the Bush administration, the Obama administration, now this current administration. And I've never been so concerned and filled with just a lot of frustration. And again, I got to the point where I really felt like I couldn't do much anymore as an attorney. And, if I, as an attorney, couldn't do much to help, safeguard the rights that they had, and just help this vulnerable community, then who could? Yeah. And so, that's why I'm here. But yeah, our immigrant community is extremely resilient, like I said, and they'll make it out of this. They'll make it out of this one way or another.
Oh yeah. And that's what I think people who have not been an immigrant of any kind, they don't have a clear understanding of how these kinds of things work. I also don't think that there's, one of the components for me that I think is terrible about the time and place that we are right now is this lack of empathy for the human experience. That's not to say that every single person who's coming to the United States is coming from a really horrific background. That's not the case
Right.
sometimes. It's really just people who are seeking that better life component. But there is a contingent of the immigrant population who are asylum seekers, who are fleeing, drug abuse and gang and violence. And we're going to see more, honestly, with as we are shifting in climate change. It's a major contributing factor to migration patterns around the world, to conflict around the world. So when I look at things, that's the biggest concern for me. I will tell you, I'll go a step further, that I am so concerned about the immigration components related to climate change that when I teach climate change at FGCU as part of my global studies class, the major focus around it is the migration. That's the way that I get people to understand how it means, because, and I focus on low-lying islands who have been experiencing mass, migration off their islands for decades now, because sea level rise is real and it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of gets people to get the people component of it, because otherwise, some things, they still seem abstract. But it's still hard for people to understand, these are people who are uplifting their lives, taking whatever they can carry with them and coming to another place. And it's dramatic. And I think that people, we don't have empathy as much as I would like to see around it. And I don't think that we really fundamentally understand that. What do you think about that when you think about particularly that most vulnerable asylum seeker population?
Yeah. So, the goal, I think, for immigration advocates or immigrant advocates is to have a fair and just immigration system. I think that people get scared when they talk about, open borders, which, quite frankly, that's not what anyone is really advocating, because we do have to think about our security, right? However, the United States is part of, international treaties that where we have obligations to accept individuals that are fleeing persecution, and quite frankly, we are very much violating some of those those terms.
The Geneva Convention, right?
Yeah, and the 1951 UN Convention related to the status of refugees. We are actually we signed the protocol, and we are under an obligation to not just accept people that are fleeing persecution, refugees, but also not to turn them away and send them back to danger, which is what we have been doing under the migrant protection protocols, the stay in Mexico policy. So that's one. The other part of our agreement is that we should not be penalizing individuals that are entering the U.S. With, let's say, by crossing the border or using false documents, which a lot of them use in order to escape their country, right? Because otherwise they really can't. And so what we're doing is we're penalizing these individuals by putting them in detention and prolonged detention. I have clients that are placed in detention months, some a year or more, in immigration detention. And I'm sure that everyone's seen the conditions of these detention centers, and especially now during this pandemic, it has gotten worse. And I mean, it took a lawsuit for these detention centers to start releasing some of these individuals due to issues, related to spreading COVID-19. And so, again, if you don't have these challenges to these policies or action from advocates and immigration lawyers, we wouldn't be getting these individuals basic human rights, getting them out of detention. So yes, as far as from the administration and some of our leaders, we don't have that necessary empathy. And and we do get a lot of support. Of course, I believe the immigrant community has good support from strong advocates, and of course nonprofits and other law firms that are also assisting in this, in the battle. But I think that we definitely need to make more people aware of what's going on, and just make their elected leaders find a way to create a fair and just immigration system, which we don't currently have.
Yeah. It's straight xenophobia, and it's true. Like I actually have at least several of my Republican counterparts running for District 19. They're running on Build the Wall, which I think is hilarious because we're in Florida. I'm like, where are you going to build the wall to protect Florida? But I digress. Because it's a ridiculous component for me to begin with. But, there's something I want to share with people, because I've shared it a little bit, but I think it helps to create that empathy. And that's why I started with the empathy discussion on it, is that because a lot of people in the United States haven't left, because they are stoked by fear, right? There's this, they're coming to get you. And, you had Trump saying, people coming across the border from Mexico are rapists and thieves and things like that, which is just horrible, horrible things to say about anybody, let alone a blanket group of people, just to kind of stoke your base. But the reason I know in my heart of hearts that it kind of comes down to xenophobia, and that it can be done in a different way, is because I myself have been a migrant, an economic migrant outside of the United States. And this has put me in a position that a lot of other Americans, particularly white Americans, haven't been in. I moved to Taiwan as an economic migrant. I went on a tourist visa, and then I worked. So what did that make me, Maureen? Right. Right. You go over, you come in on your tourist visa, you get your job. I mean, I was riding, we had all sorts of ways to re-up our visa until our respective jobs got our documentation, if they even had that desire. Right. Otherwise, I had this experience of not only going through another country's legal immigration system and going through the less than appropriately documented process of that as well. And what did that mean? Did that mean that I was any less of a person? Did that make me a bad person? Did that make me a criminal? No, I was just somebody who was going to seek a job in another country. And there were plenty of people that were willing to hire me, right? That's very similar to the situation in the United States. It also put me in a position out of being the minority or the majority ethnic culture, right? Which is another place where most Americans haven't been, particularly white Americans, right? We're very used to living in this, majority Judeo-Christian component where we have, that's like everybody's very similar and very similar minded to us, right? So, experiencing what that is like. I've experienced racial, and ethnic-based hatred and violence against me because of this situation. And I share with that. I don't talk about it a heck of a lot because I think it ends up being somewhat tacky to have a white person talk about this kind of stuff sometimes. But I think it's valuable to be able to share the experience and reflect back on just how bureaucratic some of these components that people are fighting about in the immigration discussion are, how they're just kind of these things that are arbitrarily put together by states to protect whatever their particular interests are. And what it means to be that type of person, to go and try and pursue life, job, school, economic development, and personal, income development in another country. And how that doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a moocher. It doesn't make you a burden on society. I lived in two of the countries that I lived in that were outside of the United States. I had nationalized healthcare, both of them, right? So in the United States, in that context, I would be discussed as the leech, trying to benefit from the great social programs in the United States. Nobody in Taiwan said that, right? Nobody in Japan said that about me. And also, I will say that, so I did in Taiwan experience some ethnic-based violence. I did experience discrimination based on these situations because there are cultural issues. And it was a very, interesting thing, again, to be somebody who had grown up in a dominant culture and move and live into another one. So I bring that with me. One other story. Let me just share this one other story, and I'm going to kick it back to you, Maureen, because this is where it's interesting, highlighting the differences between the United States approach to immigration versus other countries' approach, right? So the other thing I had experienced was when I was living in Japan, and I had, and actually in Taiwan too, both times I had jobs there that were not consistent with what my visa allowed me to do. And both times I had, in two different jobs in two different countries, I had an escape plan from my jobs. Wow. And in Taiwan, it was at a school, and we were allowed to teach, but not in the kindergarten. So when the immigration folks came up to our school, all the teachers who were in the kindergarten had to strip off their clothes and walk up to the elementary school to avoid the immigration folks. Wow. And then in Japan, the place I was working was operating as ostensibly like a dance club, not like a nightclub, like a fun, not like a really dodgy kind of thing that you might have seen about Japan, but like a regular dance and like drinking fun kind of club. But they only had a license to be like something else, and they didn't have the appropriate license to be hiring foreigners like me. And so that one too, when they had a raid, they came up, the police came up. We actually had to turn the music down. We had to move the tables closer together. All of the foreign staff had to switch their shirts to like regular street clothes to blend into the crowd. And so both of these situations, okay, like I said, two different countries, I'm on two different visas, right? And, had this experience where I'm, and would I have been an illegal immigrant? That's probably what I would have been called in the United States context, right?
Right.
But I will tell you this, in neither one of those circumstances was it ever conveyed to me that I was going to be deported, that I was going to be going to jail, that I was the problem. Both of those circumstances, the employers, my employers, took the responsibility to protect us and themselves. Now, as crazy as it is to flop off your shirt and run over to another part of the building, right, and pretend like you're not working there was a different sentiment and approach to how they were treating their immigrant population that seems to be very, very different from the way that we treat immigrants in this country. I'm thinking recently of the raids on the factories, and this was prior to the coronavirus, but the factories that, but I believe they were meat processing chicken. Right. It was a chicken processing factory, right? And what did they do? ICE rolled in and arrested all these folks as their job. And it's a very, very different approach than what I've seen in other countries. It places the fear on the individual, right? And the consequences on the individual rather than whom is actually breaking the law, which is the company that's employing them. And so anyway, I want to share that as a story about me that's not as well known because I don't have an opportunity about it. But maybe you can speak to this, Maureen, a little bit more about how it is that we view this that is, detrimental, particularly when it comes to the corporations that benefit from the labor that migrants offer.
Well, the first and best example would be that ICE raid in Mississippi, right? So immigration was able to arrests over 600 individuals. And so that means that this corporation, which, by the way, was not punished at all from what from my understanding, that means they were using immigrants to produce their items, and they were using them for work. And I'm pretty certain that they were probably underpaying them. They were probably not receiving protections, worker protections, and I'm sure they were being abused. And so, a lot of people are quick to say that, immigrants are the ones that are contributing to low wages, but who in fact is it the employer that's choosing to break the laws and basically create this very competitive working environment where they would rather hire someone and pay them, low wage when they're not really supposed to? Or is it someone that, wants to work? And so I think that we definitely have to shift that accountability to employers and people that are doing this. And we haven't, we haven't had them take responsibility for it. And it's sad because immigrants continue to get blamed for a lot of things. And, I'm glad that you shared your stories because I feel that it has really given you a very good understanding of what it's like to be in an immigrant's position. And I hope that, people don't have to be in those positions to really understand that, we'll have immigrants, and just because they're immigrants doesn't mean we have to treat them poorly and like subhumans, which is what's happening, and again, they're in the US, and while some of them have entered the country without authorization, and something that you mentioned during the last time that I heard you speak was that that's a civil infraction, and I'm so glad you know that, and because it is, and yet we're treating them like hardcore criminals. Right. We are separating parents from their children. I've heard of stories from clients, that have gone through this, that have told me that ICE would threaten them. You're never going to see your children if you don't do this. There's been a lot of victims of sexual assault in ICE custody. And, again, they're put into these overcrowded makeshift cells. They're living out in tents. The conditions are deplorable and horrible, right? And again, people just turn the other way because they're immigrants. Right. Are they not human beings?
Outgroup.
Not us. They don't, a lot of people just really don't care about what happens or what they go through or what they're put through. Actually, it's not what they go through. They're being put through this. Sure. They're being put through this by the administration. They know it. They're, everything that the administration has done recently, from forcing them to wait out in Mexico to all the different policies, detention policies, is to deter immigrants from coming in. But has that really happened? No, it hasn't. And it won't, because people would rather go through this in the US than risk their lives back home. And that's just the bottom line. Absolutely. There is no deterring a person that has suffered so much that they'll go through everything and anything that the administration will and can put them through, just so that they can flee and so that they can find safe space. So, yeah. So, again, I hope that people don't have to go through that experience to understand that what we're doing to immigrants is wrong.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I just tried to use some of my stories to, to highlight the differences, right? Because I think that one thing that people in the United States do is say like, oh, well, this is what everybody does. Everybody treats there are immigrants like this. And no, it's not. And yes, immigration it's a bureaucratic process. It is a civil infraction if you don't do it properly, right? Like never for a second as I'm, riding, and this is true, riding on a ferry boat out of Taiwan to international waters and then back to get my visa re-verified on what we call the visa run, right? Did it ever occur to me or was conveyed to me, or did I hear stories about other people being thrown in detention centers or, deported or beaten? You know what I mean? It was just, and if it happened and if they caught you, it's like, hey, here's a fine or whatever, or we may not actually give you the long-term visa, but it's never like this incredibly punitive and violent process like it is in the United States. And I try to tell the story because of that, because I think we've normalized it. We've normalized the hate against the other largely because of Trump's, desire to use it to bang his drum of fear to get people to vote for him. One other thing I want to say before I pivot away, we can talk about something else, is that I want to reinforce something that I learned through my work with the Immigration Project. We were part of an international network of organizations that were trying to address this issue. And right as the Trump policies were closing the borders, and he had that policy where folks were being forced to stay back in Mexico, it created a humanitarian crisis in Tijuana. And we actually had an organization that worked on that border area in Tijuana. So a lot of people would come up through that area and they would kind of stop through and then come into the United States, and they would go to their family or wherever it is that their destination was. People never stayed long-term there, but when they closed the border and didn't allow people to come in, immediately homeless shelters filled, food pantries and things like that were just immediately overwhelmed because people had nowhere to go and they couldn't turn back, and they weren't necessarily welcomed by the Mexican government and these service agencies, these faith-based organizations, all of these folks who are the traditional servers around the world who help folks like this. They were immediately overwhelmed. And it was so heartbreaking to hear the stories of the people trying to help folks there and just how despondent they were. And then what happens when you get in that flux? You're out of money, you're vulnerable. It actually, by the way, increases human trafficking, which is like the thing that a lot of the Republicans want to throw against the border crossing is like, oh, well, the border crossings, this is, they're grabbing children and putting them into human trafficking. Well, now that may occur on some instances, and I've seen some credible evidence where that may have happened occasionally, but it's certainly not the norm. And I know from the research that I've done on this in the past is that when people are in those flux positions are actually far more likely to, get snapped up by a Mexican gang and then trafficked from that point. So we've created and exacerbated the problem that many Republicans think that they're solving. Do you want to comment on that quickly before we pivot to something else?
just very quickly. Yes, it has. And again, the implementation of the MPP has created or has made, I would say, immigrants into a commodity for gangs to kidnap them and ask for money from their relatives in the U.S. So yes, they're being placed in danger, and kidnappings have grown. And I've had clients that have been kidnapped by gang members. I've had clients that have been kidnapped and have told me how they were able to escape, and how unfortunately a mother and children couldn't. And from my understanding, if the family members in the U.S. do not pay the ransom, that family disappears. So yes, it's a crisis right now. It's inhumane, and it needs to change. It does. Yeah.
Again, that humanity component. All right. So I know that there's a lot of other issues. I was just so excited to have Maureen here with her experience in this, because it's something that, we've been so consumed by the coronavirus that we forget some of these other big issues sometimes in our kind of everyday conversation, because we're so, focused on this complete calamity that we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
It's understandable, I think, but it's so refreshing to have a conversation about another topic that's also extremely important. So I appreciate that. But I do want to pivot, Maureen, to you to tell us a little bit more about, so outside of the immigration issue, which is clearly something that's very, top of mind for you, very important for your campaign. What are some other things that you're hoping to do as a state representative for your district?
Yeah. So part of my platform focuses on reforming our criminal justice system so that we can finally end mass incarceration, and that we can end the disproportionate effects it has on minorities. Actually right now in Miami-Dade and Broward, we have the opportunity to elect a new state attorney. Mm-hmm. And after decades of the current two state attorneys that have been in the two counties. So right now we have, like I said, an opportunity to create a more progressive criminal justice system that works for everyone. And the statistics right now are just very staggering on the racial disparities in incarceration and sentencing and conviction rates. Let me just pull up some statistics. I actually have some from Broward County, and it looks like even though the Black population in Broward County is about 16%, or actually this is Florida overall. The Black population is about 16%. They account for almost a little bit over 40% of the individuals that are incarcerated. And that's a huge, huge, huge difference. And of course we need to change that. And so I'm hoping to work with not just the different state attorneys and the sheriff's office, but also within the legislatures to implement some laws that will, protect against these disproportionate effects. And so that we can finally end mass incarceration, we can actually focus on the pretrial intervention programs and just rehabilitative programs so that we can reduce recidivism. And again, when you have someone incarcerated, their family suffers too. Yeah. You may have someone that is the sole financial contributor in a family, right? Yeah. And say they're arrested and they can't afford bail because they're indigent and they don't have the financial resources, then not only is that person suffering, but so is their family, because they don't have the breadwinner there. And, if they have children, it's worse. So, part of what I want to see is a criminal justice system that's reformed so that we don't keep putting these people in this cycle from incarceration to poverty back to incarceration. So that's something that I would love to see, and that I would definitely be working with the different offices and also the legislature to see that change. And then, of course, I'm also very focused on...
Before you go into your next issue, I just want to say something, because there's something that came up in my mind on this. Sure. And I love that you're there, and I love that you have the technical expertise in law to be able to really be a valuable contribution to that discussion around criminal justice reform. One thing that I always think about in this space, that I know, having been married to a criminal defense attorney for 10 years, is that there is a dynamic that a lot of people don't understand about the legal system in relation to the state attorney, the PD, and then the private criminal defense attorneys. You have to pay quite a bit of money to get a private criminal defense attorney. And the public defenders are way over caseloaded. They have 80, 90, 100 more cases, that they're trying to deal with. So they usually have very little bandwidth to kind of do anything above and beyond just basic things.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing, and this is where I want you to give me just a little comment on this. There's oftentimes, and I'm glad that there's somebody that's up for election in your area as far as state attorney, because there's also the state attorney side. State attorneys, they move up in the ranks by wins, right? How many people they get convicted, how long, da, 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 da. So there's often almost this kind of like picking off the easy wins against the PD. The PDs themselves will often be like, I can't even defend this person, so off they go. And so there's almost this like commodity trading to a certain extent amongst people who have been arrested within that part of the legal system, because they're just seen as wins or losses on a case. There's a very like, blanket look at what's winnable, what's doable, and how you're going to do it. There's a little exchange, and that person is, off without, they're sent away sometimes without a little more care than, win-loss column versus the PD and the state attorney. And these are people's lives, I guess, is what it kind of comes down to me. But it ends up being this really, really sad calculation that has significantly negative effects on communities and of people of color. So I don't know, maybe I'm totally off base on that, Maureen, but I just wanted to throw that out there as like just a tiny, tiny bit of like inside baseball on what happens in the legal system that some of us think is just this totally just and fair system.
Right. Yeah. No, and you're correct. You're absolutely correct. The state attorney has a very big role to play in deciding who they're going to prosecute. And part of the reform that I want to see is also making sure that they're being held accountable for making sure that they're prosecuting the right person, first of all, because we've had, instances where, like you said, they just want to add to the number of prosecutions that they've done when perhaps they have, exculpatory evidence or otherwise that says this is not the right person, right? So you're not really helping not the community or the victim by doing that. You're just helping yourself kind of like move up. And so I definitely want to see that in the laws where state attorneys will be held accountable for things like that. So, and I think they have one of the biggest roles to play, honestly, other than the legislature, the state attorney and the judges as well.
Yeah. Well, it's culture for me too. It's what do they prioritize? So anyway, so great. Well, thank you. And there was a second thing that you want to say, and then I want to spend just a few minutes before we go on the out here talking about being a woman candidate here. But you were going to, before I interrupt you on that point, what was the second big issue that you wanted to bring up here?
Well, we can actually move on. I'm fine with it. We can talk about being female candidates during this.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Let's go ahead and do that then. So I, I like to have this, experience and, hearing from you on what it's been like, being a woman running in that district. I know that your primary opponent is a man. And have you, what kinds of things have you been experiencing? Do you feel like there's kind of a tide change, or do you feel like there's still a lot of people who are very much dismissive of women running for office?
Yeah, so I think I would like to start with the first challenge that I had in running, right? And that was deciding whether I was qualified to run, right? And I think that a lot of women have difficulty with that. They question themselves. Am I qualified? Am I the right fit? Is this something that I can do? And I feel like it's a little different for men who I think may wake up one day and say, I'm going to run. Right. So really, and I've seen that happen. And, I had to really have a good conversation with myself and ask myself, can you do this? And are you qualified to do this? And again, I have been serving my community for over 11 years, almost 6 years as an attorney. And I have been representing individuals in my community. And I have, fought against harmful policies. I have fought ICE. I have fought the administration. I have challenged just about everything. And here I was, wondering, am I qualified? And again, that was, I think, my first challenge. And I said to myself, this is what I've dedicated my career to public service. And I'm at the point where I need to do more for my community than what I'm doing now. And so I got through my first challenge, right? My second challenge was now getting thrown into, of course, the campaign world, and being told that I needed to be more likable and smile.
Funny, I've been told the opposite, by the way. Just to prove that nothing is ever there's never a moment where women don't get criticized. I've actually been criticized for smiling too much.
Wow. Well, I mean, you're then, according to them, you're doing it right, because I'm not doing it enough. And it's kind of hard to do when you're talking about serious issues. And again, I've spent my entire career being someone that focuses on the issues, and I'm not focusing on whether you like me or not. I want to get my work done, and I get work done. And so I think that was one of the most challenging things that has happened to me as a female candidate. And quite honestly, other than that, I think that it's been going well. I do believe that it's important for women to empower each other, and for the most part, that's been happening. And I think that in order for us to properly create laws that will benefit everyone, we definitely need proper representation in the legislature and in Congress, because so far the laws that have been written and that have existed for as long as we've been a country did not have the voice and representation of women, right?
Right.
So a lot of them really reflect what men have wanted to do or say. So being that we're more than the majority in the United States, I think that we need more women, and we need better representation, and not just with women, but also we need more diversity and people with different backgrounds. So and I guess I'll say this last thing is that as I campaign, I always think about how the women before us had it much, much more difficult, right? Yeah. And how they were pioneers, and I can't imagine everything that they have gone through, and how they've helped us and have paved the way for us to run too. And even with that, we still face challenges as female candidates. And I think about that all the time. I do. Like in 2016, we had Hillary Clinton, right? And how she really opened up the door to have at least 5 female presidential candidates this year. And it's great. And I want to see more. I do.
Yeah. Me too. I agree with that. I'm so appreciative of all the women's work throughout our history in the United States, working for a seat at the table, making sure that we have the right to vote, and that we can continue to advocate for ourselves, our families, and our communities. I really do appreciate that. And I just wanted to kind of commiserate with you just before we go all the way to the end here, but that it's just so funny when we talk about it, because it's true. The men in these races, it's like they just literally wake up, they're like, of course I'm qualified. And they never get the same criticism. I mean, I've been criticized, like Estelle and Maureen here, for smiling too much or not smiling too much, or wearing the wrong size heel, or not crossing my legs in the right way, or wearing a dress that was this way or that way, or I need to look more professional or more casual. It's like every single thing that you do opens you up for criticism in ways that Men never are. And I'll throw in the added one of me being a mom with small children. It's just everybody has an opinion on it. I've been asked, so what are you going to do with your kids more times than I think is appropriate as a candidate? Now, granted, I'm saying, hey, I'm a mom, because mom is like another part of that representation for me that I think is important. But it's still like nobody's asking any of the other candidates, who are men, what are they doing with their kids? I'm still waiting for Dane Eagle to drop out of the race because his wife is about to have a baby. I actually tweeted about that. I said, well, I'm, so unfortunate the timing of your new child coming. I'm sure you're going to be putting your campaign on hold to take care of your new child, right? No. And I put it out there because it was absurd, because of course no one expects a man to put his life, his career, his ambitions on hold when a child comes into their family, but everybody expects a woman to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was told that, it's okay. If you're running, go ahead. I was going to say, before you have kids, great. After your kids are like out of school, that's great. But if you're running while you're having kids, like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? It's like this incredibly bizarre taboo.
Right. Yeah. And, Cindy, you probably have to work twice as hard at everything that you do, because, you have responsibilities at home, and yet here you are, you're outperforming, and, again, you're working twice as hard.
All day and all night, so you know it.
Yeah.
I was managed to get the lunch on the table just before Maureen and I got on this podcast. So the kids had their lunch and I was able to lock the door so they didn't come barging in, which they usually do. So you have to be, as a woman, not only do you have to work twice as hard, but you have to be twice as qualified. And this is where I will go out and it kills me on this, right? By far, I have the highest level of degree amongst the field of candidates for Florida Congressional District 19. I have in direct service to community organizations here, not political, by the way, because there's a bunch of folks who had run as politicians and they've done stuff that they quote for their community, right? But it's very different than what I've done. So I have an 11-year track record of working for this community. And what I mean by that is teaching yoga at the soup kitchen, doing case management for homeless families, right? Fixing the houses when something breaks in them for those same homeless families, right? Coaching brand new organizations who help autistic families grow, coaching them from infancy into being a fully functioning organization, and that's the work that I've been doing on the ground for, just because I care, right? And, I have to compete, and especially my Democratic component jumped in this race despite losing to a man who didn't even campaign in 2018. He jumped in because he thought that he was more qualified for me. I got my PhD the year after he got his master's, and he's old enough to be my dad.
Yeah.
So not that age or any of that stuff allows, for discrimination. And I 100% believe that anybody can be a representative. But it's that qualification piece that women struggle so much with. I am abundantly qualified. You know what I mean? I have publications. I'm a professor. And it's like, boom, boom, boom. And people still look at me and they're like, well, could be better. I'm literally what else could I do? How many more books do I need to publish before you think I know what I'm talking about? How many more years? Because I'm already way ahead in the metrics on everybody else in this community and this district, right? What else do I need to do? And so for me, I always go back to it's not the qualifications. Right. It's something else that's holding people back. And so I'm hoping that I can still keep pushing that part out, but it kills me sometimes. I just want to be like, but look, and it never seems to matter sometimes. But anyway, we could go on this diatribe forever, but I do want to wrap because I'm sure, Maureen, there's so much stuff that you have to get back to for your campaign and your work. But before we leave, I just wanted to have you tell us, how can we help you? What do you need and where can we find you?
Well, you can certainly find me everywhere. Before we went on lockdown, I was in Collier County. Oh my gosh, there were weeks where I was there 3 times a week. And again, my district is very broad. So, I would find myself in Broward and Miami, Collier. Now I'm just doing the best I can, with this new reality and campaigning under this new reality. And so you can definitely check out my website at maureenporras.vote. That's MaureenPorras.vote, VOTE. I would love for everyone to just, join in the cause and help get more pro-choice Democratic women elected. We need representation. And I feel that women have this innate ability to really represent everyone, not special interests, but the needs of the community. So if you want to see that change, I urge everyone to join us both, and help spread our message, and just reach out to us with whatever ideas you have and any issues that you think may be something that we should consider if we're not, already doing that. And I think that would be great. That'd be very helpful.
So absolutely. So go ahead and visit Maureen at maureenporras.vote. She is also on Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Perfect. And where can they donate to your campaign?
It's also on my website. It's maureenporras.vote.
All right. Perfect. And don't forget, because that's what grassroots candidates absolutely need. We need love, support, retweets, follows, and a little bit of, dollars in our coffers, because that's how we get our voice out there, especially for Maureen, who's in such a diverse district with multiple media markets and needs to be able to get that message out there that there is a strong, qualified, pro-choice female Democrat running in that district, and that is something that we absolutely need in this era. So thank you so much, Maureen, for joining us here today. I really, really appreciate the conversation. Looking forward to continuing to connect with you to fight for Florida and serve our communities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Cindy. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here on this episode of Dr. Cindy Speaks. Go ahead and view us next time. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, keep listening. We have some great episodes coming up as well. Some fantastic speakers coming up to share with us about messaging in this time of coronavirus and to help get that public good messaging out. So look forward to that. Stay tuned. Check us out wherever you find your podcast. You can find it published on Podbean, on my website, and Apple Podcasts as well. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Dr. Cindy Speaks. If you'd like to learn more about her campaign, go to cindybanyai.com or connect with her directly at vote@cindybanyai.com. We love connecting with people. Contents of this podcast are paid for and approved by friends of Sandy Banyai.